starting at $150,900 for the turbo version. And yes, there is no actual turbo on this electric vehicle. The Taycan is Porsche's first truly electric car. But first and foremost, the automaker wants everyone to know that it's a Porsche. But before Porsche unleashed me on the twisties, they had me drive the car around LA on the freeway, where unfortunately, that's where this car will spend most of its time. On the streets or on the highway, I found the ride to be surprisingly smooth. Porsche puts the ride of the vehicle somewhere between the Panamera and the 911 lineup. While cornering and handling were a given for the car, a tamed suspension that handles the bumps and ruts of city driving was a surprising bonus. Regardless if you're driving on the freeway, through downtown LA, or on PCH, the Taycan is a very comfortable, very smooth vehicle. But it also goes fast, so I drove it fast. And because the Taycan is a Porsche, the automaker decided not to sort of water it down in order to make it an EV. Yes, it has this giant battery pack, and you can feel the heft of the pack while you're going around corners, but the car still handles really well, and it accelerates like there's no tomorrow. It's just a joy to drive. What's interesting is that this car has a 2-speed transmission. Most EVs have a single gear. This one has 2. First gear is for that, giving you a lot of torque, and the second gear is when you get the speed to help you cruise in order to increase efficiency. But you can hear the gears change when you're in sport mode and you turn on the sort of weird space age sounds that this car will make while you're driving in sport mode. You can also turn it off if you just want silence or you just want to turn up your music really loud, but that's pretty cool. What's insane is that the calipers on this car are huge. The front calipers are about the size of an infant. But the reality is that with regen taking care of 90% of your braking on daily driving, you're probably not going to swap out your pads for at least 6 years, which is kind of insane when you're driving around and you're doing stuff like this. I will say that while I'm driving, with the brakes, I can feel the difference between the regen and the actual hardware calipers touching the pads. There is a sudden and sometimes surprising increase in braking power. If you're just sort of cruising around town, it's not that big of a deal, but when you're really going for it and you're coming to a corner and you stomp on the brakes, you feel that extra there at the end. Those brakes have to stop a lot of power and heft. The Turbo S puts down 750 horsepower and 774 pounds of torque. The turbo version is no slouch either, with 670 horsepower and 626 pounds of torque. Both are sporting a 93.4 kilowatt hour battery pack and have a lower center of gravity than a Porsche 911. All that adds up to a vehicle that is a blast to drive on the back roads. Now, I am driving the Turbo S, which is the high-end version of this vehicle, starting about $180-something thousand. There's also the Turbo, which is much cheaper, and even cheaper than that, starting a little bit over $100,000, is the 4S. Do you need the Turbo S in order to enjoy this car? No. Unless you're hitting the track every weekend, you probably don't need all the power that's in this car. That said, it is a magnificent machine on the back roads. Of course, it's great to have the most powerful motor, but again, drivers are unlikely to use it to its full potential. But regardless of which version of Taycan a person purchases, it's still a Porsche. Now, it's impossible to talk about this car without the Tesla Model S Performance Edition coming up. Now, they're both four-door sedans, they're both electric, and they both go really fast in a straight line. But, and I know Tesla's working on a new version of the Model S that'll have plaid and it'll be fast and it'll corner well, which the current Model S kind of doesn't. Right now, this is the sport EV to have. This is the one that you want to drive everywhere. This car and cars like this are going to help getting more people excited about EVs. Tesla has done a magnificent job getting, well, other automakers into EVs, but also just the general public. But the more automakers that build electric vehicles, the better. And when you have a car like this, you're going to have the folks who can afford expensive vehicles they're gonna plunk down some cash for this thing, and then they're gonna drive it, and then they're gonna think, well, maybe if I got a Model 3, or maybe if I got an ID4, or a Kona EV, or a Chevy Bolt, and then they're gonna tell their friends, and then they're gonna tell their friends. And suddenly everyone's gonna realize that driving an EV is fantastic, regardless of how much money you have to spend. What's helping people get excited about electric vehicles is that the charging infrastructure is continuing to expand, and a lot of that has to do with Volkswagen's Electrify America subsidiary. The Taycan supports a charging rate up to 270 kilowatts, and when we hooked up the pre-production Porsche to it, it hit 247 kilowatts and charged the battery from 11% to 80% in 22 minutes. Now that was on a charger that can output up to 350 kilowatts of power. But if you want this car, you're going to have to wait until the end of the year, and there's a good chance that even then you'll be stuck on a waiting list. Porsche enthusiasts and those new to the brand have already put down enough deposits to keep the automaker busy for a while. The Porsche Taycan is an amazing feat of automotive engineering. Now, there's only so much you can do with, well, physics. You can feel the heft of those batteries when you're going around the corners, but Porsche's been able to make it feel, well, lighter and smoother than it should be.